Hey everybody, it's Stacey with Bridges 527. The Green Knight. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, we hated it. It was so bad. Just, there was a lot. There was actually a lot we could talk about. So I will go into a few things for some of you history buffs who are going to see it and actually like it. But I saw it with a friend of mine who loves that time period, was super excited, loves all the I knew, like, I've never liked that story and it's kind of rough and I didn't really expect to like it. I was going more for work, but neither of us liked it. So it's not just me. I'm sure there'll be people who love it, but I will say I was not prepared. Do your homework before you go. I just assumed it was rated R because of the beheading and some of the darkness of it, but no, there's some sexual kind of stuff. And what, like, had I known what I known, I would not have gone to see it. It wasn't, especially if I'd have known how bad it was gonna be. But I really wouldn't have wasted my time. It was really slow. I'm like the whole way through going, oh my gosh, will it ever end? And that's not me. I'm usually really patient with movies, but it was kind of obscure. I don't know. It was hard to follow. It was pretty trippy and random. It was like Monty Python, Holy Grail, but like dark and not funny in terms of like disjointed and kind of random segments of things and whatever. So, and I read the story a million years ago. I don't remember it well. So maybe if that was fresh, it would have made more sense. But anyways, just full disclosure, I did not love it and I really wouldn't recommend it for a lot of reasons. But if you're thinking about seeing it, and I just would encourage you, be aware what's in it before you go. Because I would never, I would not have chosen to have seen some of the scenes that were in it. And if I had known, they were a lot in the background. I mean, it wasn't, but yeah, just do your research. Do your research. Okay. But for spiritual connections, because there certainly are like a lot that we can talk about. I think so many things, it's just that time period or what, like any kind of quest type story is going to have a lot of ways to connect, I think, to the Bible generally. So, but a few things that came up in this, really, I would say overall, you've got a story about a young man who, especially in this version, is struggling with his identity. He's surrounded by knights. He's not a knight. His uncle is the great King Arthur, and he's kind of this nobody who's really kind of been a cad. Like he hadn't really had to grow up or take responsibility. And so he's really looking for identity. He's looking for honor. He's looking to be validated. And you see him having women in his life who are continually kind of manipulating him and things. And he's just kind of like goes along with whatever. But he seems to be really searching for a father's approval. And so the movie starts with King Arthur and this one moment where he touches his face and it's very tender and he cleans some mud off. And I don't know, there's a sweet kind of moment. And then at the end with the Green Knight, there's a very similar scene. And it's like he was looking for approval from almost both of these men in a weird way, or creatures. And, there's probably a lot more to that, but this is very, I don't know, it's just something I've been thinking about, like the interesting parallels of those two scenes. But you see him, like his whole life being driven by looking for people to take him seriously and to see him as a good man, and yet not really sure if he is one inside. And so I love that you've got several people along the way, like speaking into his identity before he is, and calling him a knight, seeing the knight in him even before he really has earned that. And him wrestling with, what does it take to get there? And even one guy says, so what, you go and do this one act and suddenly that's it, you have honor? Like just a one-time deal? And that's the thing, is it's not a one-time deal, but the whole year that it takes him to confront this thing and to show up for his destiny all along the way, he's having to pass tests, and his virtue and his honor and his integrity and his willingness to serve others, it's all being tested. And he has these like, almost these vignettes all along the way of different encounters that he's having with people where he's having to do something for them, and one person's asking for help. And there's so many interesting things in that. If the movie wasn't so bad, like the story, this part of it, the talking through it, I actually think is fascinating. I just didn't enjoy sitting through it enough to want to have to do analyze it. But the analyzing part's great. The part of actually watching this show was not. But anyways, because I'm like, this is the part I actually think it's really an interesting story. But I did not when I was watching it. Anyways, but he's talking to this girl who's lost her head. So he's like, are you a man or a human, or are you ghost? And she was like, does it matter? I still need help. Like, it's such an interesting dialogue. Again, I think there's some really, you could unpack that a lot. But anyway, so she needs her head. He needs, and he's like, well, what will you do for me if I do this? And she was like, you're a knight. You should know better than to ask that kind of, like, that's not the character of a knight. And so he does this thing for her after all, but there's just this constant wrestling in him where he's struggling with a character on every level and being tested and really coming up short, frankly, all along the way. He's not a very likable person. And then he's hiding behind like magic trinkets and stuff, thinking they're going to save him. And at the end, there's this scene of him needing to meet with the knight, the Green Knight, to face his fate. And he's running and he's like, I don't want to do this. Like, I can't, he's terrified. And he's like, I can't face death. I can't put myself in your hands. I don't trust you. And then he gets stripped down of everything and he takes off. Well, he finally gets a vision of his life and if I go back without any honor, how does this play out? And it's that whole thing, if a man gains his whole life, but loses his soul in the process, gains the world, but loses his soul, like what profits him? And so he really has this vision of the miserable life he will have without honor and just his own knowing it for himself. Like everybody else may think he does, but he knows what he will know and just the darkness of that. And after kind of seeing that play out and realizing like, I don't want this, and seeing all the consequences, almost a prophetic vision of the negative playing out. So he's like, okay, fine, I'll accept my fate. And that's when the Green Knight gives him that same thing. Like King Arthur like commissioned him to go off. It's like, okay, great. You're going to be a man. You're willing to take on this mantle of, risk and leadership and whatever. And he celebrates him for being willing to go there. And then the Green Knight celebrates him for being willing to do it well at the very end. And he hasn't done it well, but there's this moment where he strips off and he's like, hang on. And he takes away all the magic stuff that's supposed to protect him. And he decides to meet him. Basically, it's like Adam coming to meet the Lord without the fig leaves and just saying, here I am, I have nothing else. And I think when we come to the Lord, that's the thing, we have to get to the point where we take off everything that we're trying to put on that will make us impressive, that will protect us, that will put us in a better light, like all those things. And we just have to strip it down. And he sees us anyways, and let him look at us completely stripped down, completely naked. And then he's like, well done. Good and faithful servant, not because we did it well, but because we were willing to face him as we are in the nakedness of our own soul and let him love us there and accept us. And that's when we find our acceptance. That's when we find the love that we're looking for, the Father's pleasure in us. Like, that's when we find it. And so there are some really interesting themes in the movie. There's just better ways. I'm sure there's other movies you could watch to get them, but read the book maybe. But anyways, but there is such an interesting moment in the end. And then the ending is still a little bit like kind of empty and hanging a little bit, frankly. It just kind of ends. Like, you're like, oh gosh, does he get beheaded? Does he not? That was the whole thing. I'm going, I don't remember how this ends. But there's kind of a mystery to it in the end. But he does decide he would rather lose his life, but as a man, than to keep it as a coward. And that it would be better to die with honor than to live without it. And I think there's some great truth in that. The other thing that I was thinking of, there was a couple times where there's like some really stupid vows and, promises that people get into these things. It's like, why would you even do that? That's so dumb. Like, why would you take this game? Like, that makes no sense. I had a hard time with the motivation of a couple of things, but I was reminded of, and I'm going to forget his name, but the story in the Bible where the man is like, Lord, if you give me victory in battle, then I will sacrifice whatever comes out of my house to you first. Like, anything comes out of my house, it's yours. And it's his daughter that comes out of the house. And so he agrees to sacrifice his daughter. And again, it's like, can you not just repent of making a really stupid vow in the first place? But he was like, I'm a man of my word. There were sacrifices you could have made if you'd made a bad vow and get out of them and just have the humility to recognize, like, I shouldn't have said what I said. That was dumb. But he doesn't seem to have done that in the Bible. And you see that in here, like these men, a couple of them just making like really entering into some bargains that actually the other men seem to know what they're doing and provoking this. But he kind of willingly, the Green Knight kind of, what's his name? The the main character, kind of willingly enters into the, Sir Gawain, thank you, I totally drew a blank. But he kind of willingly enters into these games, and you're like, why would you do that? It makes no sense. Like, that is not going to go well for you. Like, you can just see it coming. Why would you do that? But, anyways, just again, as we're looking at biblical parallels, that's when it made me think of immediately is just these people in the Bible that also made some really, especially that one, who made such an ill thought out vow to the Lord, and his commitment to keep it, even though I think God would have probably preferred his humility and repentance of a bad vow before he wanted to sacrifice, because God doesn't delight in sacrifices, he says. But anyways, so yeah, interesting movie. Slow, boring, trippy, super confusing, like, but lots of interesting things to talk about, for sure. So, whether you see it or whether I've just saved you from it, hopefully these kind of reviews, I guess my hope and prayer is that it helps you think, helps you learn to like see the Lord in things, but also just in this, it's like a little Bible study where you're like, oh, this was a lot of like I'm hoping the Lord's just speaking in these videos too. And then it's, encouraging, to your life and whatever it is you're facing, whether or not you see the movies. These are just launching pads for other discussions. The movie is just the tools to get the conversation started. So it's not really the point, but, anyways, all right. If you like the movie, please tell me why. I would love to hear. Thanks. Bye.